Welcome to Sunday Ripple. I'm Rob Anderson. Each week we explore scripture and the ripples it can create on our everyday lives. Sometimes we're going to reflect on Sunday's message. Sometimes we'll dive into other passages that speak to where we are. Whether you're a Christian or just tuning in for a thoughtful conversation, this podcast is here to help you reflect and grow and keep the message moving through your week. Let's get into it. Let me ask you something right out of the gate. When was the last time you thought to yourself, genuinely, without any asterisks, I have enough? Not like I have enough for now, not I have enough compared to some people, not the version where you say it out loud but then immediately open a browser tab and start looking at something you don't own yet. Like just enough. Full stop. For most of us, that feeling is weirdly hard to access. And I don't think it's because we're ungrateful people. I think it's because we've been marinating in a culture that profits, literally financially profits, from us never feeling like we've arrived. Every algorithm, every advertisement, every carefully curated social media highlight reel exists to create a small, quiet ache in you. A sense that something is slightly off, that you are almost there, but not quite. And hey, lucky for you, there's a product that might help. It's relentless. And the sneaky thing is, it doesn't feel like pressure. It just feels like normal. But here's what I want to explore with you today. What if contentment, real, grounded, not just putting on a happy face contentment, is actually available to you? Not as a personality trait that you either have or don't have, not as a reward you earn once your life gets sorted out, but as something you can actually learn. Because that's exactly what Paul said he did. And he said it from prison, which, as contexts go, is a pretty compelling place to make that claim. Today, we're camping out in Philippians 4, and by the end, I hope you walk away with something more than a nice feeling. I hope you walk away with a new way of seeing, and maybe a few things to actually practice. Let's get into it. All right, let's just name what's actually going on first, because I think a lot of us feel the symptoms without ever diagnosing the disease. So here's the disease. We live inside an economic and cultural system that is entirely dependent on you feeling like you need more. That's not conspiracy theory. That's just marketing 101. Entire industries exist to manufacture desire. Their job every single day is to make you look at what you have and feel a small but persistent gap between that and what you could have, what you should have, what everyone else apparently already has. And it works incredibly well. Think about the last time you upgraded your phone. Not because it broke, not because it stopped working, but because the new one had a slightly better camera and now somehow your perfectly functional phone felt like a burden. You were carrying around a device that could access all of human knowledge, navigating you anywhere on Earth, and video call your grandmother in real time, and it felt like a disappointment. That is a marvel of psychological engineering right there. Or think about houses. At some point in human history, a roof and four walls was the dream. Now, we watch television shows specifically about people deciding whether a house is adequate, and the drama is always, it just doesn't have enough space. Meanwhile, the square footage they're rejecting is larger than what most of the world lives in. We're not bad people for feeling this way. We've just been trained. The book of Ecclesiastes, it's written by a man who had tried literally everything: wealth, pleasure, achievement, projects, fame. He puts it plainly. Chapter 5, verse 10 says, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income." That's not a new problem. That's a 3,000-year-old observation about the human condition. The hunger for more doesn't get satisfied by more. It just grows a bigger appetite. Now, here's where I want to be careful, because the answer to all of this is not to feel guilty for wanting things. Wanting a better job, wanting to provide for your family, wanting to improve your situation. That's not a sin. We'll come back to that later. But ambition and contentment are not actually enemies, even though we sometimes treat them that way. But the starting point has to be honesty. We have to be willing to look at the current that we're swimming in and actually see it, because most of us don't. We just float along wondering why we're tired. The first step toward contentment is simply waking up to the fact that discontentment has a home address, and it's not inside you. It was built for you, brick by brick, by a world that needs you restless to keep running. And once you see that, you can start asking a different question. Not, what do I need next, but what do I already have? That's a small shift, but small shifts create really big ripples. Okay, let's get to Paul, because Paul is the guy who writes one of the most famous passages about contentment in the entire Bible. And I think we do him a serious disservice when we read it too quickly. Here's the text. Philippians 4 starts at verse 11, says, I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. Catch that? Learned. Not, I was born this way. Not, God zapped me with a contentment upgrade one afternoon and now I'm fine. No, just learned. Past tense, implying a process, implying failure, probably, implying that at some point Paul was not content and then something happened, and then over time, through experience, he got somewhere new. This is genuinely good news if you're a person who struggles with discontentment, because Paul is not saying some people just have the gift and you either do or you don't. Now, he's saying this is a learnable skill, which means it's available to you. But let's make sure that we understand who's writing these words. Paul is not writing from a hammock. He is in prison in Rome. He is under house arrest, waiting a trial that could end with his execution. He's been shipwrecked multiple times, which is the kind of thing that really puts a dent in your travel enthusiasm, right? He's been beaten, stoned, run out of cities, and abandoned by people he trusted. His ministry, by an earthly metric, has been a pretty rough road. And from that place, he writes a letter so full of joy. The word rejoice appears 4 times in 4 chapters. A letter about peace that surpasses understanding. A letter in which he describes having learned to be content. That's not a man who found contentment because life got easy. That's a man who found something underneath life that held when everything on the surface was totally unstable. Now, here's the part I want you to sit with. What was the process of learning for Paul? We don't get a detailed memoir, but we get a clue in verse 12. It says, I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. The learning came through the range, through both, through having plenty and through having nothing, through the mountain and the valley. The contentment Paul describes isn't the kind you find when things finally line up. It's the kind forged in the fire of things absolutely not lining up. Which means, and this is important, you may actually be in a better classroom right now than you think. I know this from the inside. In 2010, inside the same month, my wife and I lost our house, our car, and my job, all 30 days. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because I want you to know that what I'm talking about isn't theoretical for me. Here's what I discovered in that season that I genuinely could not have discovered any other way. I had been building my security on the wrong foundation, not intentionally, not maliciously. I was working hard, providing, doing what I thought a reasonable person does. But underneath all of it was this quiet assumption that my stability came from what I could produce with my own two hands, my own sheer will, my own effort. And when all three of those things disappeared in a single month, the assumption got exposed. What I found underneath, once the noise settled and we had no choice but to stop and just be, what I found was that God was still there, completely unaffected by our bank account, completely unconcerned with our credit score, still present, still sufficient, still enough. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that season was fun, because it wasn't. But I will tell you that I learned something in that valley that I don't think I could have learned on the mountain. I learned that my security was never really in what I had. It was always in who God is. And that once you learn that and really learn it, not just believe it as a theological proposition, it changes the ground you're standing on. Discontentment often comes dressed as a sign that something is wrong. And sometimes it is. But sometimes it's actually an invitation to learn, to go deeper, to discover whether your peace is really anchored in Christ or whether it's just anchored in favorable circumstances. But those two things feel identical until circumstances change. All right. I have to address the elephant in the room. The verse, the famous one, the one on coffee mugs and gym walls and motivational posters everywhere. It's Philippians 4:13. It says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, I love this verse. It's a real verse. It's in the Bible. It's true. But I think we've accidentally turned it into something it was never meant to be. We've made it a motivational sports anthem. I can win this game. I can nail this presentation. I can hit my goal. I can do all things, which sounds great until you lose the game and start wondering if you prayed hard enough. But look at the context. Look at what Paul says right before it in verse 12. I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. And then verse 13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. The all things is not a limitless achievement promise. It's a contentment promise. Paul is saying I can face plenty and I can face poverty through Christ who strengthens me. Christ is what makes both survivable. Christ is the variable that holds whether the bank account is full or empty, whether the circumstances are favorable or brutal. This is the secret. And it's not a secret in the sense of like, here's a trick. It's a secret in the ancient sense, a mystery you can only know by going through it. You can't get there by reading about it. You can only get there by living into it. And the deeper truth underneath this is something Jesus himself said in John 6, when the crowd was following him because he'd fed them miraculously. He turns to them and he essentially says, you're following me because of bread, but I'm offering you something else. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Here's what I mean. Like over the years, I've thrown myself into a lot of hobbies. Board games, got deep into it. Making music, woodworking, video games. Yeah, even producing a podcast, which if you're listening to this, hello, it's me. I'm the guy. Yeah, each one of those pursuits got real investment from me. Time, money, energy, maybe some Amazon purchases that I don't want to admit about. And every single one of them was genuinely enjoyable. Now, I'm not saying they were bad, but none of them, not one, ever filled the thing I was actually hungry for. They'd be great for a while, and then the shine would wear off, and I'd find myself looking at the next interesting thing, wondering if maybe that one would do it. What I eventually had to reckon with is that none of those pursuits were the problem. The problem was that I was asking them to do something they were never designed to do. I was asking hobbies to feed a hunger that only a person can feed. And the more I've leaned into a deeper, more intentional relationship with Jesus, not religion, not performance, not checking boxes, but actual communion, the more I've found that the restless searching has quieted down. Not because I've stopped enjoying things, but because I stopped needing them to be the answer, or maybe even the distraction. See, the hunger is real. I had the wrong address on it. Paul found that the one source that actually holds in plenty and in poverty, in success and in failure, in prison and in freedom, is Christ himself. Not Christ as a coping mechanism, not Christ as a mood booster. Christ is the actual ground you stand on, the foundation underneath all the other foundations. The gift of enough isn't a feeling that arrives when you finally have the right stuff. It's a person. And the wild thing is, that person is already available to you right now in whatever circumstances you're sitting in. The threshold isn't later, it's here. Okay, I know what some of you are thinking. I can feel it. You're sitting there going, yeah, this all sounds great, but I have actual goals. I'm trying to build something. I'm trying to get out of debt, grow my own business, raise my kids well, advance in my career. Are you telling me to just chill out and be grateful and stop trying? No, absolutely not. And I want to be really clear about this because I think this is one of the most common misreadings of what contentment actually means. Contentment is not complacency. They are not the same thing. Contentment does not mean settling. It's not passive. It does not mean that you sit on your couch with a warm cup of tea and whisper, everything is fine, while your life is slowly falling apart. That's not contentment. That's just denial with a Bible verse attached. Look at the parable of the tenants in Matthew 25. The master doesn't come back and celebrate the servant who's buried his talents and did nothing with it. He celebrates the one who did something, who took what they were given and worked with it faithfully. There is a holy, God-honoring ambition that is entirely consistent with a contented heart. Or look at Proverbs 31, famous passage about a woman of noble character. She's not passive. She's up before dawn. She considers a field and buys it. She makes business decisions. She's productive, creative, hardworking, and she does it all from a place of strength and dignity, not from a place of frantic striving or consistent comparison. The difference, and this is the key, is not whether you work hard or pursue goals. It's the difference. It's the difference is from where you work. Like, what's the source? Are you working from rest, or are you working from restlessness? Are you building from a place of identity and purpose, or are you building from a place of emptiness and need? Are you striving because you have something to offer, or because you're terrified that without the achievement, you're not enough? Those two postures can look identical from the outside. Same long hours, same ambitions, same goals, but they feel completely different on the inside. And they lead to completely different places over time. The discontented striver is always chasing, always just behind, always comparing, always exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. The contented person with holy ambition is working just as hard, maybe harder, but they're grounded. They can celebrate other people's wins without flinching. They can experience setbacks without unraveling. They can go to bed at night without the sense of worth depending on what happened that day. The second person is actually more effective, by the way. Not just more spiritually mature, more effective, because they're not spending half of their energy managing anxiety. For me, the thing I'm working toward is what I'd call abiding life. I want to live in such a way, like so genuinely filled with Christ that it radiates outward without me having to announce it. That people walk away from a conversation with me and feel something they can't quite name, and maybe they come back to find out what it is. And when they ask, and this is the part I love, the answer is simple. It's Jesus. That's it. I have Jesus. That's the pursuit. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not there yet, but I'm in process. But here's what I've noticed. The fact that I'm pursuing that instead of a title or an income bracket or a platform has changed the quality of the pursuit entirely. There's no finish line I'm desperate to cross. There's no competitor I'm measuring myself against. It's just more of him, less of the noise, more of what actually matters. The invitation here is not to stop pursuing things. It's to examine the engine, because the same destination can be driven toward from completely different places. And Christ doesn't just want to give you the destination. He wants you to change what drives you toward it. That's not a small thing. That's actually everything. Okay, so we've named the lie. We've met Paul in his prison cell. We've found the secret underneath the surface. We've clarified that contentment and ambition can actually coexist. So now what? Here's what I want to say practically. Contentment is not just a belief you hold. It's a practice you build. You don't just decide to be content one Tuesday and then coast. It's more like a muscle. It develops through use, and it atrophies when neglected. So let me give you three practices, not magic formulas, just some handles. The first is gratitude, but don't worry, not the cheesy kind. I know. You've heard it. Every life coach and wellness blogger on the internet has told you to keep a gratitude journal since I don't know, what that started about 2015. And look, they're not wrong. The research on gratitude practice it's remarkable. But the version I want to talk about is more specific. Not just I'm grateful for my family and my health and coffee. That's fine, but it can get rote pretty quickly. The kind of gratitude that actually shifts something is particular. It's specific. It's noticing. It's the difference between I'm thankful for food and there was a moment at dinner last Tuesday where everyone was laughing at the same time and the light was coming through the window and it was enough. Psalm 103 starts with, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits." The battle is not just to be grateful. It's to not forget, to actually remember, to notice the specific gifts instead of letting them blur into background noise. Try it this week. Not a long list, just maybe one thing a day that was actually good, particular, specific, real. The second practice is generosity. This one's kind of counterintuitive, which is usually a sign it's worth paying attention to. If the scarcity mindset tells you that you don't have enough, the antidote is not to get more. It's to give some away. I know it sounds backwards, but it works. Because, well, it's not because you earn God's favor by being generous, but because generosity is an act of declaration. It says, like, I have enough to share. It says, my security is not in what I'm holding on to. It says, I trust that the God who provides this can provide again. Proverbs 11:24 puts it in pretty stark terms. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another person withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. Generosity is not an act of financial bravery. It's an act of spiritual sanity. It reorients you. It reminds you who owns things. It shrinks the scarcity feeling more effectively than accumulation ever does. You don't have to give a lot. Start small. Give something. Notice what happens in you when you do. All right, the third practice is Sabbath. This one might be the most countercultural of all three, which, given our current moment, is really saying something. Sabbath is the weekly practice of stopping, of not producing, of not optimizing, of declaring with your actual schedule that the world does not run on your effort alone. That you can cease from work for a day and the whole thing won't fall apart. That you're not the engine. In a culture that has turned productivity into a virtue and busyness into a status symbol, resting on purpose is a radical act. It says, I'm not what I produce. I am not my output. I am a person made in the image of God who is allowed to stop. The original Sabbath command in Exodus wasn't just a rule. It was a rhythm built into creation itself. God rested. Not because he was tired, but because he was modeling something. A pattern of work and rest that human beings need in order to stay sane, in order to stay grounded, in order to be, in order to remember that we are creatures and not machines. One day a week of rest is a weekly declaration. It says, I have enough. I've done enough. It is enough for today. I had lunch with a friend recently, just an ordinary lunch. And, near the end of it, he said something kind of offhand about wanting to get together again soon. And it's just a pretty simple comment. He probably said it and moved on without really thinking twice. But I sat with it because for me, it landed differently than he might have intended. It felt like a small confirmation, like that I actually have something to offer, that the years of hard lessons, the wrong turns, the seasons of loss, the slow process of learning contentment, all of it has produced something, a testimony, wisdom maybe, the kind that can only come from jumping headfirst into the exact pitfalls you'd warn someone else about. And here's what struck me in that moment. That was enough. That ordinary lunch, that casual comment, that quiet sense of I have something to give, that was a gift. I almost let it pass right by. Instead, I let it land, and it was rich. That's what I mean by noticing. Not grand spiritual experiences, just the small moments of ordinary grace that are everywhere. If we slow down enough to actually see them, man, there's so much life there. Paul, writing from prison, had none of these circumstances that we chase. No financial security, no comfortable home, no freedom, no Netflix, no certainty about his future even. And he wrote about joy. He wrote about peace. He wrote about contentment. Not because he was out of touch with reality, not because he was suppressing his feelings with religious cheerfulness, but because he had found something that circumstances could not touch, something underneath the chaos that held. And that's something, that someone, is available to you right now. Not after the promotion, not when the relationship is fixed, not when the kids are easier or the debt's paid or the diagnosis is better. Now, here, in the middle of exactly what you're in. The gift of enough has already been given. We just have to learn, like Paul, slowly, through the range of experience. We have to learn to unwrap it. So here's where I want to leave you. Tomorrow morning, the algorithm will fire back up. The comparison engine will hum to life before you finish your first cup of coffee. Your inbox will remind you of everything you haven't done yet. Someone on the internet will have more, do more, be more, and it'll be right there in your pocket, ready to whisper that you're behind. That's a Wednesday. That's just reality. But you don't have to be swept away by it. You can wake up and do something small. Name one thing that's already enough. Say thank you for something specific. Give something small away. Take a real rest this weekend, and I mean it. These aren't shortcuts to a perfect life. They're ripples, small, intentional movements in a different direction. Movement that, over time, quietly will change the way you see everything. Paul learned contentment. You can too. Not because your life will get easier. It might not. But because the one who holds your life is enough. He always has been. And the more you live into that, the more you'll find it's actually true. Thanks for spending this time with me. I don't want to take it lightly that you give your ears and your attention here. I really appreciate it. So go into your week with open hands and a grounded heart. And remember, small ripples can make a big impact. So go make yours. Hey, before you go, I'd really love to hear from you. Whether this episode encouraged you or brought up a question or just made you think, you can actually send a message straight to us. It's an easy way to share your thoughts or your story or even just say hello. Just click the link in the episode description to reach out. I read every message and I'd be honored to hear how God's moving in your life.